Hi, good evening. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Ishan. Tonight on The Big Picture, we're talking about the state of the RTI, the Right to Information Act. Now, why are we talking about that today? Because the Naga Peace Accord has been signed, but the details are not even with the Home Ministry. This has been revealed by the RTI. The External Affairs Minister, Sushma Swaraj, is embroiled in a controversy over Lalit Modi, but the Ministry of External Affairs says the information pertaining to that particular case does not come under the RTI. So, cloud of doubt has been raised over RTI and often the government's and the bureaucracy's commitment to deliver on the right to information. And to discuss that, we are joined today by Vinod Kumar Sharma, political editor at the Hindustan Times. Anjali Bhardwaj, Secretary, National Campaign for People's Right to Information, is here with us. And Gopal Krishna Agarwal, National Spokesperson of the BJP, is also with us in the studio. Welcome all of you. Anjali, I'll start with you. You heard what I said at the outset. Does that mean that the RTI itself has a cloud of doubt over it, or is it a commitment from the government, or are these isolated instances that would happen no matter what the government or the dispensation?
Well, I think that all of these facts which you mentioned do certainly cast a huge cloud on the entire transparency regime. And I would not say that these are isolated incidents. These in fact show a trend in the functioning of the government. The government took very, very long in terms of even appointing the Chief Information Commissioner. The post of the CIC, the Chief of the CIC, was vacant for over 10 months before the appointment was made, which led to the weakening of the institution. The number of cases that are pending in the institution have gone up tremendously, and the impact has been extremely detrimental on the functioning of the Information Commission. Even otherwise, we are seeing that on the one hand, the government is not amending the law, but there are several things which are suggesting that there is no political commitment at the moment to strengthen the transparency regime in any way. For example, even with the various amendments that the government is proposing to bring about in different laws. Let's take the Whistleblowers Amendment Law. In the Whistleblowers Amendment Law, the act was passed in 2014. It has still not been operationalized. Whistleblowers are getting killed in different scams. They're being attacked. And when there was a demand to know why this is not being done, people were told that there is an amendment in the offing. When an RTI application was filed to ask what amendments were being made, the government came back with a response saying that we cannot share the amendments with you because they are sent to a higher authority. Now, under the Right to Information Act, there is no such provision as saying that if something is sent to some higher authority, it cannot be shared with the citizens of the country. When people asked which higher authority, there was total silence. Similarly...
All right, so there's a lot of ambiguity, and especially in the responses in these two particular cases that I spoke about in the introduction as well. And we'll come back to details of that. And Mr. Agarwal, I know you would want to respond to that. But Mr. Sharma, coming to you first, as far as you're concerned, you've observed the RTI, the evolution of this entire process. Do you think that all political dispensations, no matter the Congress or the BJP, were a little wary of the RTI, what should be said, or what can be given out and what can't be given out? So this is a problem of larger of a mindset, or this is a problem particularly with this government right now?
You know, frankly, I'd like to make 2-3 points. Some of those points may be very subjective and thereby open to debate. First of all, I think any law is as effective as the government's will to have it enforced. Any law. You mentioned 2 cases. One was about the Naga Accord, and the other was about the Honorable External Affairs Minister's decision, which is currently under a huge controversy and debate. I can understand the government's response insofar as the Naga Framework Agreement is concerned, because I don't think this is actually the time to disclose the details of that, because the details are still in the process of being worked out, though the Prime Minister has invested his personal prestige in, in that pact. But one would wish them a happy journey towards a final agreement. Insofar as the other issue is concerned, there I would have been happier had the External Affairs Ministry said that we have no knowledge of it, which would have been more honest reply rather than saying that this information cannot be shared. It is what they say.
They're saying that the information cannot be shared and certain information pertaining to that particular RTI has been filed, sent forward.
Anyway, so, you know, the reality is that this decision perhaps is not part of the institutional memory of the Ministry of External Affairs. And that's why there is whole controversy about it. But the right to information, indeed, I too have this feeling. I would cite another specific example to you. When there was an RTI moved to find out the contents of the letter, the then Finance Minister Chidambaram wrote to George Osborne,
right,
his UK counterpart, vis-a-vis Lalit Modi. Then RTI was moved and, you know, they were told that this document is in the possession and records and part of the Enforcement Directorate, and which has certain exemptions under the RTI. Now, I am not going to pass a value judgment on this because, you know, I spoke to the Finance Minister himself when he had an explanation to offer. So I'd rather leave it at that. But this whole idea of responding to an RTI application saying that it has been sent to another department which is not within the ambit of RTI, you know, could be one way of circumventing the RTI.
Is it a way, Mr. Agarwal, because you've heard both these points of view, is it a way to establish a certain opacity as far as, or you might say that safeguarding national interest in the case of the Naga Accord? We can't disclose that many details at this point. Sharma was pointing out. But there are several instances where a lot of clarity could have been achieved and matters could have been nipped in the bud, but they certainly have not happened.
No, I agree that RTI is it was a landmark development in our country and we have a lot of transparency. But you have to look into the other part of the issues also. When so many activists and NGOs are talking of so much on the RTI that everything in the government should be transparent, then you have to consider what is the reservations of the bureaucracy. They how they are functioning now. They just transfer the file to the secretary, down the secretary. Nobody is taking decision because of so many problems. You have to consider that aspect also.
So would the problem have been compounded by the fact that for 10 months we did not have a chief information commissioner?
Let me finish it. Okay. I have heard you all. What is there is an Official Secrecy Act also. There is a space which the bureaucrats want to function also. And when the NGOs and other talk so much of transparency, when they are themselves are not transparent on their funding and many issues.
Well, the government is certainly ensuring that there is transparency as far as NGOs are concerned.
What I'm telling you is there are both sides of the coins.
Okay.
I agree that RTI is a very good act, but it is hindering on some of the issues where...
Is it? Because the nature of the act itself, Anjali, is to ensure that the bureaucracy is moved out of that comfort zone, the government is moved out of that comfort zone, that this is in somebody's interest or we can't share this information. Everything should be, after all, it's the taxpayers' money that is being used to implement such decisions.
Absolutely. And let me just lay out the context here again, since we are talking about this. The Right to Information Act came about as a result of a long people's movement where people realized that if the government is working on behalf of them, taking decisions on behalf of them, they have a right to know what the government is doing. They have a right to know how taxpayers' money is being spent. And really the sorts of discussions that we are having right now, the issues on which people are seeking information are all what are the basis of decisions on which the government is taking. And the government is making those decisions for the citizens themselves. People are wanting to know that if a historic accord is being signed, what really has gone behind that historic accord, and if there is some information...
And it's not just people, it's chief ministers of
Apart from the fact that there are certain exemptions, there are very stringently defined exemptions in the Right to Information Act itself.
The Act is stronger than itself.
Section 8 of the Right to Information Act lays out all the kinds of information, it's related to national security, integrity and so on, which must not be disclosed. Now, anything which prejudiciously affects the interests of the country is already covered in the RTI Act. So if the government, if the bureaucracy feels that certain information should not be divulged, it can only be under the exemptions of the law. They cannot themselves say, well, this is uncomfortable.
What about this of transferring it to another department? Is it a delaying tactic? Would you call it a delaying tactic? Or do you think that, I mean, this is, given the size of the Indian bureaucracy, given the number of departments that we have, that this is bound to happen, that you direct direct one query to the MEA, but the MEA has also various departments where it would get filtered to.
Under the Right to Information law, there is a clear provision. If a citizen files an application to a certain public authority which does not hold the information, it is to be transferred to the correct public authority. But that does not mean that it should be misused, because
Right.
what we are seeing increasingly is that in a context where the government is not serious about being transparent, these sorts of clauses are misused. And let me say that this has been happening in successive governments,
Okay.
because there is an issue of mindset. For too long, government officials were used to working in an environment of secrecy. It takes a long time for them to realize that now they need to
All
be
right, so
open.
accountability.
But what we are seeing is that increasingly this trend is going up. There are cases where public authorities are transferring RTI applications to more than 70 departments, and people are waiting for their information for years.
What I want to say is isolated incidents can be tackled. They may be wrong at the part of the bureaucrats, but what is the purpose of basically RTI was to protect the taxpayers' money and identify where it has been misused.
Right.
But when you use the act to interfere in the government
But is it interference in the government, Mr.
We
Vinod
can
Sharma?
point at several incidents where RTI is being used to interfere in the activities.
In the case of Vyapam, in the case of, there's so many cases. I mean, your 2G scam, everything else. There's so many other scams that happen that the UPA regime, that the BJP
No, but
used.
RTI, but there is CAG, other institutions of the government, they are functioning. You can say RTI is the only institution which will interfere
I can't go
in
to the
everything.
CAG, I can go to use an RTI, Mr. Vinod Sharma.
No, I can understand the BJP's position. You know, why? I'm sorry, sometimes, you know, though comparisons are odious, you know, I often argue that, why is the BJP not so keen about RTI?
No, we are not saying we are not keen.
I mean, this is my...
There are isolated
No, it is.
incidents.
This is my inference from what your people are... Now, listen to me. For the same reason for which the Americans are against the use of nuclear bomb, having dropped it on Hiroshima and seen the consequences. You see, please understand, BJP has exploited this law to the hilt to expose the previous UPA government. At that time, it was no holds barred. The BJP didn't want to brook any full stops in the implementation of that RTI. Now, what the RTI activists and people curious and people wanting access to information, including journalists, are now saying, apply to yourself what you used to apply to others.
Right.
It's simple as that. Now, may I give you a small example? I have tremendous regard for the Prime Minister of this country because he's the Prime Minister of this country. But if an RTI applicant moves an application and wants to know what kind of people the Prime Minister meets in a day's engagement, he's denied information.
So
what is so sacrosanct about it?
No, how it is related to taxpayers' money?
Please. It is related to taxpayers' money. May I tell you one thing? One has seen many Prime Ministers. At around 10 in the morning, the junior information officer attached to the Prime Minister's office would tell journalists that these are the appointments of the Prime Minister over the day, because that would alert journalists into knowing which was the important...
what is the purpose of
what Mr. Sharma
Please
is
understand.
pointing to is a larger
You can mock at it.
of secrecy of
Don't
this
mock at
government.
it. I want to know who all is the Prime Minister of India meeting. And he can keep under wraps certain meetings which may impinge on national security, certain meetings that need to be kept confidential. I can understand that. I don't expect the information officer attached to the Prime Minister's office tell me that early morning the Prime Minister meets the Chief of IB, the Chief of RNW and the NSA. I am not interested in that information. Neither am I interested in knowing what transpires between them, because I can appreciate that it could be a number of matters of national security. But I want to know who all are meeting the Prime Minister, which Chief Minister is meeting the Prime Minister over the day, which other leader of political party is meeting, which of his colleagues is meeting, whether Finance Minister is meeting or not, on a day which is full of developments related to the Ministry of Finance. So I think that a balance has to be struck. And I also think that when there is a political colleague or a party colleague who is possibly prone to RTI, now prone to, open to, or vulnerable to RTI applications with regard to his activities, he should not be praised in public by the Prime Minister of the day. And that is what happened in the public rally the other day.
That is a whole other debate that we can start. But Anjali, I want to come to you because also of the fact what Mr. Agarwal was pointing to, that the comparison is made that if the government is stonewalling efforts to ensure transparency, there are NGOs, as Mr. Agarwal pointed out, who are also doing the same thing. Is that a fair comparison? And is the RTI not above that?
Okay, let me first...
Why NGOs and other things, they should not be under RTI?
Absolutely.
Yeah, even the political parties, including the BJP, does not want to be under the RTI, and it changes stand on that.
There has to be a line demarcation and line where you stop transparency.
All right.
Let me first address the other question, which is, I think, a more fundamental question that has been raised, which is that the right to information is about public money. Let me say that if one even reads the preamble of the Right to Information Act, it's about an open and transparent government where the government is transparent about its decision making, including disbursement of public money. Now, we all know that corruption is not just financial corruption. In fact, financial corruption is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
Corruption mainly, I would say, would be abuse of power. Now, people have a right to know what the government is doing, what their elected representatives are doing, what the bureaucrats are doing, what is even happening in the judiciary. And therefore, the Right to Information Act in India applies to all three arms of the government and also is not limited to just financial transactions. It also extends to file notings. In fact, there was a move by the previous regime to remove file notings from under the ambit of the Right to Information Act, and after a huge hue and cry from
that
people
the BJP also supported.
That amendment was withdrawn, and the purpose of sort of making sure that file notings are included is that this is about decision making. People have a right to know what the government is doing on their behalf. That is what is the cornerstone of democracy. So I think that is something that needs to be totally appreciated, and that is when we are going to understand that if there is a Naga Accord or if there is any other kind of question that is raised which doesn't necessarily even involve directly public funds, there is an obligation on the government to provide that information. Now, the second issue which was raised about the transparency of non-government organizations, I think it's very important to mention here again that non-government organizations that are substantially funded by the government are included in the ambit of the Right to Information law. In any case, we believe that all NGOs, all non-government bodies should be transparent.
My point was that's a whole other argument that is completely fallacious to the fact of the state of the RTI. And Mr. Vinod Sharma, I mean, we've been having this entire conversation. It points to a larger problem of transparency, of whether the government wants to be transparent or not, Mr. Agarwal, because there's serious consideration.
RTI is not the only instrument of transparency.
I'm talking about the mindset. I'm talking about the mindset, about the fact that the government says
you are deciding on the mindset on individual specific issues. On one issue or two issues or several issues.
No, but you're not wanting to talk to journalists, you're not wanting to answer RTIs.
Do you consider RTI the only instrument of transparency in the government?
No, I'm saying the moral responsibility of the government should be to
I want to like to use it. It is more easily accessible. It is a very accessible instrument. It costs very little money. And there are penal provisions in the law. If the information the officer does not... Please, for God's sake. Can I give you an example? You were just now making light of my comment that the Prime Minister's engagements are not known. May I tell you one thing? The stock market scam reached up to the doorstep. I'm not saying anything of the kind is happening in the present Prime Minister residence or PMO. But the stock market scam reached the doorsteps of Narasimha Rao, consequent to the knowledge of his meeting with Harshad Mehta. Please, for God's sake. So every little information which may look innocuous or inane to you is of great importance to somebody who wants to ensure transparency in governance.
Yes.
So, you see, may I tell you one thing? There is a need for any government or any party to have internal discussions on popular perceptions about the position of the government or that party on issue that have been in this country. And RTI is one issue that empowered a common person. Because information is power.
Yes.
And access to information and dissemination of correct information empowers public opinion and therefore democracy. Okay? So it's a very, very serious thing.
Yeah.
And if you're going to tinker with it, And if people are watching it and they have a different view of it, you must introspect and discuss it within. And find ways where you are comfortable with sharing information and people are satisfied with the kind of information.
Because
you share.
Now, I agree that RTI is an important instrument. We supported it.
Right.
It gives a lot of power to it empowers the people. We want to empowerment of the people. Democracy, information is one of the major source through which people are empowered.
Right.
We agree, but there has to be a limit to everything.
how can you impose
Like,
a limit? I mean, the fact is
I'm
that the
not
RTI,
saying-
how do you impose a limit? I mean, I can understand the government imposing a limit on its ministers saying do not talk to
You see, they had a whole lot of
bureaucrats,
BJP
do
had a
not
whole
do
You
lot of
are
active-
linking
You
this
had
in-
BJP
one
had a
incident
whole
I'm
lot of
talking
RTI
about the mindset of
empowerment.
transparency,
No,
Mr.
sir, BJP
Agarwal.
had a whole lot of
When the,
activists. You had an army of RTI activists who
You
were
have an
seeking
RTI
information
cell.
Yeah.
from the
Does
previous
the RTI
government.
cell of the
All of
BJP
them have gone underground.
We
it seems.
support the RTI, we support transparency, we support information sharing, but you are linking a statement of the foreign minister to RTI application.
No, I'm saying what is the
when
response?
she herself is ready to state in the parliament, give statement, then why you want an officer's statement?
You know,
Because
no, because there was
It
some, no,
becomes a
sir,
very
sir, please,
Because the process
with due
of
respect,
decision-making
with due
cannot-
respect, the applicant, I am making an intelligent guess, wanted it on record from the Ministry of External Affairs that they are not aware of any such decision, which is a reality. Because
So
the Honorable
then
Finance,
the information is shared.
Honorable
No, information
External
has
Affairs
not been
Minister
shared, sir. I have
kept
details
the
with you over
system
here.
out of the loop.
They are saying
Somebody wanted that on record. Please, for God's sake. Some researcher wanted that on record.
I'll tell you what the RTI said. The RTI said, kindly note that the Office of the External Affairs Minister has informed that under question serial 123 of your RTI query does not seem to fall under the purview of the RTI Act itself. And the information
And
that
you
was
see
sought
what the
was who
information
the
was.
information was sought was who took the decision not to challenge the Delhi High Court's decision last year to restore Mr. Modi's passport. Now, if that is a matter of national security, I understand that. But Anjali, should that have been spelt out that this is a matter of national security and therefore cannot be shared?
Absolutely. I think wherever there is a denial of information, then the reason for denying that information absolutely has to be spelt out. And let me also say here that the current government, and I hear Mr. Agarwal say that the
Can I
BJP
answer
is
this? Yeah, sure.
that the BJP is committed to transparency. We hope that it is, because the BJP has come to power on the plank of good governance. And underlying principle of good governance internationally is transparency, is accountability, and which is not possible without a law like the right to information. Now, I agree with you that the right to information law is not the only instrument by which the government can be transparent. Of course, there are many other ways for a government that has political will to adopt to be transparent. But yes, the Right to Information Act is one instrument which has empowered, like we heard, the most common citizen of this country to hold their government accountable, whether it is issues of rations or pensions, or it is big scams like 2G and whatever CWG that we have been witnessing. And why should it be now that the government, when this dispensation has come to power, because the right to information is now being used to raise uncomfortable questions, whether they might be about communalism or they might be about expenses, they might be about scams, then suddenly there is a clamping up. And that is a perception which is very concerning and must be introspected upon by a party which says that it is committed to good governance, it's committed to transparency and accountability.
Right, and Mr. Agarwal, that matter of perception is what the final thing I think it comes down to. I'm giving you the final word. I'll ask Mr. Vinod Sharma also say a little bit, because we're absolutely running out of time. But it's a problem of perception that the government certainly seems to start having now. Whether you respond to RTI queries, whether the number of press conferences or the open questions that were there, or the access to the media has been cut down, all those, you know, it's a problem of a perception of transparency, of accountability. Do you not think that the NDA government right now is facing a bit of that crisis?
No, we think that there is, we are supporting transparency. We are for sharing of information, but there has to be a limit to which interference. Last 10 years, we have seen that there was a complete policy paralysis. Bureaucracy does not want to take decisions on any issues. We see the movements of files.
So you're saying that the UK...
There has to be a limit to Official Secrecy Act. How much they are liable, what information to be shared, there has to be a debate,
But
and then
that has been defined in the RTI Act itself.
Absolutely. And the Right to Information Act overrides the Official Secrets Act and gives out clear
but
exemptions.
that we are not fully
It gives
on
out
it.
clear exemptions. Either the government has to come out and say that we want to amend the law because we feel that the exemptions need to be expanded. Otherwise, it has no moral basis for denying information to people. And another point which has been raised about saying that there is a paralysis in the government because people don't want to be transparent, it's totally unacceptable.
It's a fallacious argument.
Because
every decision you will
You're
challenge.
saying that the UPA, I mean, you said all along till the 2014 campaign that the UPA was doing what was doing not because the bureaucrats didn't want to function, but because of corruption, etc., etc. And now you're saying that it was because of some other reason. Fair enough,
now,
Mr. Vinod Sharma.
Now what we are also seeing is that the government is simply not maintaining records. For example, when the selection of the CIC had to happen, we asked, please share with us the minutes of the meetings of the search committee, and the response that we got from the Prime Minister's office was that no such minutes have been maintained. Now this is attacking right to information at a fundamental level.
Mr. Vinod Sharma, you've observed it all through the years. Do you see this government heading on a dangerous path as far as transparency is concerned? And I just have a minute because we've absolutely run out of time.
I think it is, and it's consciously doing so. It's consciously doing so. As I said, that it doesn't want in the hands of its present-day opponents the same instrumentality that helped it, destroy the image of the previous government in popular perception. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I think that this is a very short-sighted policy. Power isn't permanent. So sooner or later, I think they'd see the reason and they will restore to the people what has been given to them via legislation by Parliament.
And the people took it themselves.
And that is the right of a common man. Mera paisa, mera hisab. That used to be the slogan of Anjali and his colleagues, and that hisab you'll have to give. No government will be able to escape that hisab.
All right, we'll have to end it over. We've absolutely run out of time. Mr. Agarwal, I'm sure you would want to come in and respond to that, but we've run out of time. We'll have this discussion another day. But I'd like to thank you very much for coming in and sportingly taking all our comments. Mr. Vinod Sharma, thank you. Very kind of you for coming in today. And Anjali, it was always a pleasure to have you on the show. Well, that's it on the big picture on the state of the RTI. You can watch this online as well. So do let us know your opinion of what you think about the state of the RTI in this country. We'll be back with another edition of Big Picture tomorrow as well.